Welcome, baseball fans, to another episode of Sneks on Deck, the official podcast of the Arizona DBacks.
Oh, yeah, from two guys who are in college who don't even live in Arizona. Except right now. We're actually in Arizona, in our Arizona studios, that is.
I'm here with Jake the Snake Pliskin.
And I'm here with the John Russell.
Oh, geez. That's a lot to live up to.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
considering
he's famous enough to be the, and not the John Russell as in the Pirates manager from a long time ago.
Yeah, different John Russell.
John
no
Russell.
relation.
Are you sure there's no relation?
Honestly, I haven't done an Ancestry.com, but I'd be pretty surprised if we didn't know that.
Hey, we might actually be related to real baseball people. All right, so in this podcast, we're going to be talking mostly about what has gone on during the free agency craze, our pickups, who we think we should pick up, and how they would affect the team in the future. First pickup is pretty obvious to talk about, to me at least.
Who?
Madison Bumgarner.
We got Mad Bum?
Yeah, we got Mad Bum.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, oh, geez.
So yeah, Mad Bum, it's pretty obvious, is going to be our top rotation guy, the ace of the staff. He's pretty cool. He's been, like Snake said, he's been a pretty consistent pitcher for a while. Last year was pretty much his worst year, and his ERA was still 3.9, and he still pitched over 200 innings. So that's what, at the very least, what we're going to be getting from Madison.
Yes, not to mention him having, like John said, he's had 11 years. He started in 2009 with, he only pitched a few games in that year, but starting in 2010, he's been a consistent starter, and he's played good every single season. He's had a positive ERA plus every single year. His ERA has, as John said, never been worse than 3.9. His second worst is actually at only 3.7, which is very solid. He's been consistently great. He has a great bat, and he's a four-time All-Star. He's been in Cy Young contention many times, gotten a few Silver Sluggers in there.
Yeah, we also got him on a good contract, I think. 5 years, $85 million. But the kicker is that in 2020, he's actually only going to be making $6 million. And then that's going to jump up to $19 million the next year. And then $23 million the next 2 years. And then $14 on that fifth year. So what that does is that actually gives us either the ability to, keep around Ray and a couple of our pricier guys, and or pick up some other free agents this offseason. It really seemed like Mad Bum wanted to come to Arizona, and that's a big part of the reason why we ended up with him. It doesn't seem to me like Hazen ever planned on picking up Madison Bumgarner this offseason, that it kind of just fell in his lap.
And it could have possibly been affected by the fact that the DBacks have already picked up another giant this season. We talked about him in the last episode, Stephen Vogt. He was a catcher on the Giants for multiple years, and I believe he caught Madison Bumgarner's games, at least a few of them. So there's a possibility that Madison Bumgarner wanted to move to a place that he already had a catcher he was familiar with.
And another thing, though, to consider is that it kind of almost seems like Hazen's playing some 4D chess here, because by getting Madison Bumgarner off the market, for one, it blocks him from going to the Dodgers, which the Dodgers were rumored to be going after him. But it also potentially makes the market better for trading Robbie Ray, if that is part of his plan. Because now that's another lefty off the market. That means teams looking to add solid starting pitching, and especially people trying to add lefties. Now that ups Ray's value. So whether or not we trade him, Mike Hazen upped his value.
Absolutely. One concern related to Madison Bumgarner that I heard brought up multiple times was that he didn't necessarily pitch great when playing outside of the pitcher-friendly confines of Oracle Park. For example, this year, or not this year, 2019, his batting average against at home was 213, but his batting average against away was sitting at a 286, which is not great, but you always expect a pitcher to be worse when they pitch in less comfortable situations, especially being in the NL West, which has the two highest altitude stadiums in the MLB. That is something somewhat of a concern, but I'm not super concerned about it simply because he will be more comfortable in Arizona because he will be pitching there more often. It's always harder to pitch in a stadium that you have only pitched 20 games in. And speaking of 20 games, that's how many he's pitched at Chase Field in his career, and he's slightly worse. He has a TOPS of 110, which means that he's slightly worse because 100 it would be pitching exactly the same at that stadium as he does at every other stadium on average. So he's at 110, which means he's slightly worse. At Dodger Stadium, though, where we will hopefully be having a lot of important games, he has a TOPS of 98, which means he's slightly better than average. And of course, in Oracle Park, he has a TOPS of 89. So he may be slightly worse. There's a chance his ERA could jump over for this season. But that's what happened with Zach Greinke. His first season in Arizona, he didn't have a great pitching season. But then he really dialed it in and started doing great the seasons afterward. So even if Mad Bum doesn't have a great 2020, I expect him to have a good at least 3-4 seasons in Arizona.
Undeniably, though, Mad Bum strengthens our rotation.
Absolutely.
And because the other thing it does is if we keep Ray, we're probably looking at a rotation 1, 2, 3, 4 of Bumgarner, Ray, Zach Allen, and Luke Weaver, with the fifth starter either being Leak or Kelly, either of which are pretty solid options at the back end of the rotation.
Yep, innings eaters. They'll consistently get you a win every other game or so.
That seems like it so far in their careers.
Yes.
And the other thing that does is by adding that depth, it also protects some of our must-protect arms like Alex Young and John Duplantier, who are potentially going to get some starts this season. They have both got some starts in 2019 to varied success. A lot of success for Alex Young, who, potentially is going to be in a rotation in 2021 once Leak and Kelly come off the books. So trading Ray, though, what's on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it is the Diamondbacks trade Ray, 10 being the most likely?
Well, I'll give you a before and after. Before getting Cole Calhoun, I would say a likelihood at maybe 7 or 8. But since getting Calhoun, I drop it down to maybe even a 4.
Yeah, I was going to say like 3.5.
Agreed. The reason for that is there are multiple good trade options for Ray, possibly in the corner outfield. There was Eddie Rosario of the Twins and Mitch Haniger. There were options, but the options become way more slim now that we need a center fielder. And the only center fielders that I see on the market that are probably worth our time would be Starling Marte and Jackie Bradley Jr.
I mean, Jackie Bradley Jr. wouldn't require much of a return, honestly. We probably don't even need to trade Ray for Jackie Bradley Jr.
Yeah.
Because also the other reason I don't see that happening is because they're really trying to get rid of payroll, and Jackie Bradley and Ray are going to make similar amounts next year.
Ooh, yeah. I think Ray is probably more valuable than Jackie Bradley is.
Certainly.
So because of that, because of our less need for a corner outfielder, no need for a corner outfielder, really, I don't think trading him is really all that worth it. If we could get a lot of good young players that'll be ready in the next few years, great. I just don't expect to get that out of Ray, considering on most teams that would get him, which would be a team that's going for a deep playoff run this season, I don't think they'd be willing to give up what the Diamondbacks need for who would ultimately probably be a 3 or 4 starter. He wouldn't be the ace on any of the teams that made the postseason last year.
And I think that's kind of what we found out last trade deadline anyway, is that no teams were willing to give up as much as Hazen wanted for Ray.
Yeah, and he does have value this year if we keep him. This year, he'll pitch hopefully another consistently pretty good season. If he can get his walks down, that would be great. It's always good to have another good lefty in the rotation because our next best lefty is Alex Young, who is still young, still protecting him. Also, if we can keep him the entire season, we can give him a qualifying offer. Possibly he'll stay with the Diamondbacks for a year or two or maybe even longer, or we'll get a free draft pick out of that qualifying offer. So, after getting Calhoun, I would be more than fine with keeping Ray.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if we traded Ray. The only way I can see it happening is if we get a ridiculously good return. And I feel like if that was going to happen, it might have already happened, either at the trade deadline or earlier this offseason.
Agreed.
So another addition since our last episode of Sneks on Deck is Junior Guerra, the relief pitcher.
Yeah, we picked him up for a $2.55 million deal for 1 year with a $2.65 million team option in 2021, which is fantastic because that's not that much, and he's been consistently good for the last 2 years at least. One interesting thing though is last year, 2019, was his first year being a full-time reliever. In his first 3 years, 2016, 2017, 2018, he started more than half of his games that he pitched. So, even though we have a lot of starting pitching depth, it's always nice to have another pitcher who you know could do a spot start, or you know he has the endurance to stay in a game for 3, 4, 5 innings, were you to go into extra innings or have a pitcher get hurt or need to come out early. I think he's a great addition, especially because last year he had an ERA of 3.55 in 83 innings. He also had a pretty positive ERA plus of 126, with 100 being league average and anything above it being positive. 126 is pretty good for a reliever, even during the juice ball era.
Yeah, I think he's a good pickup. I'm not sure if it does enough to strengthen our bullpen to where it's going to need to be extremely competitive next year, because our bullpen was a bit of a letdown last year, at least overall.
We had some great performances, of course, with Archie Bradley especially coming in clutch. Yohan Lopez had a great start to the season, but he kind of fell off near the end. Same with Jimmy Sherfy. So hopefully we can get that consistency with Junior Guerra. I think that he's a great addition to the bullpen. But there are some other options on the free agent market who we could bring in.
Yeah, there's 3 that I've seen that look like they could be good pickups for us. One is a little bit obvious, which is Daniel Hudson,
Ex-Diamondback.
an ex-Diamondback who was incredible for the Nationals at the end of the year as a reliever, and was pretty great in the postseason too.
Yeah, he got his name out there during the postseason, especially getting the final out of the World Series.
Yeah, his projected contract is something like 2 years, $12 million. So that'll be twice as much as Junior Guerra, and I don't know if we'd be getting twice as much pitcher out of him.
Yeah, questionable.
So Daniel Hudson for me isn't my top option. My top option actually is Craig Stammen, who is probably going to look to make a little bit less than that, probably something like 2 years, $10 million. If we can get him on a 2-year, $5 million a year contract, he could be great. One thing that I really like about him is that he has a very high ground ball rate, which with the strength of our defense on the infield, I think would play really well for the Diamondbacks.
Agreed. One thing to keep in mind is if you're looking at the stats from last year, he's slightly better than Junior Guerra was, with an ERA of 3.3 in almost the exact same amount in 82 innings as opposed to 83. But he has a WAR this last year of .8, whereas Daniel Hudson had a WAR this year of 2.0. So he is definitely a less of an addition than Daniel Hudson would be, but I still think he would be an addition. He would be hopefully he would be more consistent than like Yoshi Hirano. And a similar pitcher in that way too, because Yoshi was a split ball pitcher going for a lot of ground balls and double plays, and Craig Stammen is a similar style of pitcher.
Yeah, we wouldn't be getting them to be a closer though, too, which is nice
That's
because
true.
I think Archie Bradley, for me, kind of has that position now on lock, more or less.
He has the stuff of a closer with his changeup, curveball, and fastball being his main three pitches.
Yeah,
I think him being a closer is great. That's what we should have had for a while, in my opinion.
especially because of how good he did once he was the everyday closer. Because the other thing to consider is we also have, in my opinion, probably our setup man in Kevin Ginkel, who last year had great stuff that you never know how it's going to play next year. Once they figure him out a little bit better, it might not play as well. But I see Ginkel as our setup man too. So if you're looking at the bullpen as it is right now, if you've got 8 guys, it's probably looking something like Archie Bradley, Ginkel, Lopez, Guerra, Chafin, Sherfy, Andres, and maybe Silvino Bracho, or potentially either Alex Young or John Duplantier as kind of a long reliever. So I think we probably could bop one of those guys out of there if we add an arm, either a Craig Stammen or a Steve Cishek even.
And Steve Cishek would also be a very positive person to have in the bullpen. All three of them, but especially Stammen and Daniel Hudson, do have histories of injury. So first, looking at Daniel Hudson, if you remember back in the day, he went out, he tore a muscle in his elbow, I believe, and he needed to get Tommy John surgery. And he actually re-tore the same ligament during rehab. So he essentially had to have Tommy John surgery twice in the same like time period. Now, this was quite a while ago. So he clearly showed that he can come back from an injury like that. But anytime you have a person with a pitcher with a history of arm injuries, that's always not a good thing. And Stammen also has a history. He tore a flexor muscle in his right forearm, and he has hurt his arm too pitching. Doesn't seem like Cishek has any arm injuries. He did get injured last year, but it was from getting hit in the shin with a baseball. So he has had injuries, but of the three, it seems like Cishek is the most likely to stay healthy.
Going into the 2020 season, possibly our biggest hole is right field. After non-tendering Souza and Adam Jones walking away, going to go be playing in Japan in free agency. And because of that, we made a pretty big signing, which is Cole Calhoun.
Yes. The former Angels right fielder, Cole Calhoun, hits left, hits a lot of home runs, but is not known for his batting average. Last year, he had a batting average of only .232, which is below his normal rate, but he also hit 33 home runs, 74 RBIs, and had an OPS of just under 800.
So essentially, we're getting him to hit home runs and also to play a pretty solid right field.
Yeah, he's also known for his defense, for his glove. Some people have said that it's a bit exaggerated because he doesn't have all that much speed. According to Baseball Savant, his sprint speed is in the 30th percentile. So he's not particularly fast or rangy, but he tends to have a good glove from all the information that I've looked at personally. I don't see any reason why he shouldn't at least be a plus defender in right field.
The other thing is he is from Arizona, played at ASU, longtime Diamondbacks fan. So it's not too surprising that we went after him.
One concern I have for him is Cole Calhoun hasn't been great against lefties, but he hasn't been awful either. He had 10 of his home runs last year against lefties in about a little over half as many starts against lefties, half as many plate appearances against lefties. So he still hits lefties. He's a little bit worse, but not significantly. Not to the point where you would never start him against a left-handed pitcher. So I think Cole Calhoun, with all that being said, is a great addition. Another home run hitter is always useful in the lineup. Of course, we still have Ketel Marte and Eduardo Escobar, who will hit a lot of home runs, hopefully, as long as they stay on the same track as last year with Christian Walker. Peralta will hit some. I think Calhoun was a great addition, but we still have one open outfield spot.
Yeah, and to me, there's really two main candidates for center field for us. One of those is a free agent, which is Kevin Pillar, and then one of them is through trade, which would be Starling Marte, because I hate to say it, but it's a no-go on Shogo.
Ah, sad, yeah. Shogo Akiyama signed with the Reds only a few days ago. He was a great potential, but he was a bit of a risk-reward player. He's one of those players that maybe you get him and he could be fantastic, but he could end up being another Yasmani Tomas.
The other issue potentially with Shogo would have been that he had been a third lefty bat in the outfield, and having three lefties starting in the outfield
Makes you susceptible to lefty starters.
So yeah, I think either Pilar or Marte would be righties. So let's kind of do a breakdown. Let's start with Pilar, actually.
All right. You want to know last season's statistics?
Yeah, well, I mean, Pilar was non-tendered by the Giants, and I think he was going to make about 10 million this year. So,
Which,
so most likely, if we got him, it would probably be for like a 1-year deal,
more
and
than
he'd
likely.
probably be making something like 8 to 10 million, my guess.
I think that'd be fair, and the Diamondbacks do have more than enough cap space to fulfill that type of deal. I don't even know if he'd make 10 million. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe more like 7. He only had a WAR last year of 1.0. He had a batting average of 260, OPS plus of less than 90. He's you could argue that he's a negative bat in the lineup. He has a decent average, okay on base percentage, but an OPS of only 719 last year. And that was better than his career average. He's not great with the bat.
To me, Pilar is getting to the point where he is still a solid center fielder, but projecting probably in the next year or two to be more of a right fielder. And I think that would more or less be what we would be getting with Starling Marte anyway. Defensively, at least, he's won some gold gloves, but he's definitely slowed down a bit. Now with Starling Marte, though, we would also be getting a plus bat.
Not to mention the fact that he's a very fast player. Looking at Baseball Savant again, his sprint speed is in the 92nd percentile. Not to mention, he had 25 steals last year with only 6 caught, 33 the year before, 21 the year before that, 47 in 2016.
Yeah, to me, probably the most attractive thing about Starling Marte is what he does for our offense. I mean, if you add Starling Marte as a true leadoff hitter, then you're looking at a lineup something like this. Starling Marte, center fielder. Then Ketel Marte, second base. David Peralta is a left field. Escobar, Walker, Calhoun, Kelly, Ahmed.
Not to mention Madison Bumgarner batting for you in the 9 hole.
I mean, because of if a lineup like that, there's no free outs, not even close. That's what I think I like the most about Marte. That means that Walker and Calhoun are 5-6 hitters most likely. So even if a pitcher can get past Peralta and Escobar and Marte, they still have to face guys that can hit home runs. Before we call it a night, we're gonna make some predictions / play manager a little bit. If we could each make 2 moves this offseason, what would they be? So I'll go first. Um, my first move would be to trade for Starling Marte.
Okay.
Fairly obvious that that'd be one of the things I might want to do. And my trade would be, it's a little loose around the edges,
All right.
but I would start it off with the centerpiece being either Corbin Martin or JB Bukowskis, one of those guys
Okay.
that we got in the Grinky trade,
But only one of them.
but only one of them. And then in addition, I would add Ildemaro Vargas,
Okay.
a guy I'd never heard of until I researched for this video, Dominic Miraglio. I hope that's how you say his name. And then Taylor Widener. So I would do all four of
Ooh,
those guys.
that's a big trade.
Now, that's a lot of players. I think that would be enticing for the Pirates. I think by dipping a little bit into our pitching depth, which is our deepest area,
true.
we're getting some value out of all the farm building that Hazen has done. I think Vargas is probably ending his time where he will really be able to get a spot on the Dimebacks with guys like Leba and Andy Young coming up.
And Perdomo.
But he would still be a solid utility man for a team that is looking for a cheap option like that. And then it's also reported that they're looking for catchers because they don't really have a lot of catchers either in their minors or even on their roster at this moment. So either way, I think it would help the team that is rebuilding. It would be a solid return, and I don't think it would dip too far into the pool for the Diamondbacks.
I think that would be a good trade. The Diamondbacks have one of the deepest farm systems in the MLB, partially because of the trades and partially because of our draft picks. I don't think trading that would necessarily be bad. The only thing is, a few years down the road, we may regret it. One of those players could just become a fantastic player, but if Starling Marte is worth it, I think that could be a solid trade.
I think the second move, I think it won't need much explanation, but I'd sign Steve Cishek to 2 years, $10 million. I think with Starling Marte, we'll be adding about 11, 12-ish million dollars for 2020, and Steve Cishek will be adding another 5. I think that fits well into the budget that the Diamondbacks are going to be trying to fit into, and I think it addresses our two most pressing positions.
All right. I also address those two positions, but in a slightly different way.
All right,
So
lay it on me, Snake.
I'm going to start off with Steve Cishek. He would also be the person I would draft or pick up in free agency. I think we would have to pay him a bit more than John thinks. I think we would maybe have to give him 2 years, maybe $13 million. He has been making $6.5 million in both 2018 and 2019. He made $6 million in 2017 and $6.65 million in 2015. And he hasn't gotten any worse from those last couple years. He's been quite good, pretty consistently good that entire time. So I think we would maybe have to pay him a bit more. But I think paying him a bit more would not be an issue because of the second player that I want to get. So to start off, I know some fans would not be a huge fan of this, but I think Cattell should be our, at least for now, center fielder. Starting center fielder straight up. Looking at the defense, he's a great second baseman. He's a plus defender at second base. But he's arguably a plus defender in the outfield also. I would personally argue that in only less than 100 games, he has 5 defensive runs saved in the outfield. That's very good.
Absolutely.
He also has a great fielding percentage of .994 in center field. He's a fantastic outfielder. I think having him be our starting center fielder would be more than fine. But then, who would we get to play second base? Well, there's one other person on the free agency market that neither of us have discussed. But I think we could go for Brock Holt. Former second and third baseman for the Red Sox. Brock Holt is arguably probably league average defending, but he has a few huge positives. One, he's about league average defending second base, which would be his main position. But he is an above league average outfielder also. So, hopefully not, but if Peralta gets hurt again or struggles to recover from his injuries last year, or Calhoun gets hurt, or if we just have some players that end up not performing how we want them to, we could always have Cattell and Brock Holt switch. Now, he hasn't played a lot of center field, only a few games, so he's mainly a corner outfield when he plays. He's a little bit better in right field than left. But he is a plus defender in the outfield and at least league average at second base. Not to mention, with the bat, he has had a positive OPS plus the last 2 years, and he's had a pretty good batting average. This year, he almost batted 300. Had an on-base percentage of 3.7, and I think potentially he could be our leadoff man. Now, he's not incredibly fast, but he's about league average when it comes to sprint speed. And I think he could be our leadoff man because he also doesn't hit many home runs, which obviously you would like to hit more home runs, but that means he'll be on base for Cattell, for Peralta, and for Escobar. I think if we could probably get him for relatively cheap also. His last contract in 2019 was $3.5 million. I think we could possibly get him on a 1 or 2 year deal. Maybe 2 years, $8 million, somewhere around that. Plus, that would give you enough cap space to definitely have enough money for Cishek.
Yeah, so my main objection to that mostly is that I don't really see Brock Holt as a starting player. I don't think he's necessarily productive enough. I mean, he does hit for a good average, which is nice. But I don't necessarily, unless he has a breakout year, and I think the Diamondbacks already have some depth when it comes to utility. I mean, Josh Rojas can play pretty much every position. You got Jake Lamb covering first and third, potentially bringing up a guy like Andy Young to cover some second base. Tim LeCastro, who can play all 3 outfield positions incredibly well and is great at getting on base.
But Brock Holt has proven himself in the MLB since 2012. And you're right, he hasn't been a starter. He was a starter in 2014 and 2015, where he played 106 games and 129 games respectively. And in 2018, he played 109 games. So he's played a decent amount both of those years. And last year, he had under 300 plate appearances, played in 87 games, and was a league average defender, and had a WAR of 1.0. That means if he had played, he played about half the season. If he had played the entire season at that level of production, he would have had a WAR around 2. I think that's fine for a starting second baseman. I think that's better than Kevin Pillar would be. And personally speaking, I don't know if I trust Starling Marte to be worth what we would have to give up to get him. So that's my argument for Brock Holt.
Well, baseball fans, thanks for tuning into episode 2 of
Sneks on Deck with Snake Pliskin and the John Russell.
In Hazen We Trust.
And No Step on Snack.